There's a certain predictability to school hallways after hours, lights dim to save energy, faint echoes of voices bouncing off tile floors, the lingering scent of dry erase markers and cafeteria pizza. Ben had walked them before, but tonight the air felt heavier. Something in his gut twisted the second they stepped inside. Emma had been excited about the conference. Said Mr. Carter told her he had great things to say about her writing. Ben expected the usual, handwriting practice, some social development notes, maybe a comment about how Emma zones out when math gets boring. What he didn't expect was him. Mr. Carter. Standing outside the classroom like he was waiting for a dental procedure, not a routine parent-teacher check-in. James Carter was usually polished, put together. A clean-shaven, buttoned-up guy who gave firm handshakes and had perfect posture. Tonight? He was fidgeting. His smile twitched at the corners like it didn't quite know what expression to settle on. His eyes barely met Ben's, landing instead on Lauren with a half-second too much familiarity. Ben noticed it instantly. That micropause. That half-smile that came too fast, then died just as quickly. Mr. Carter stumbled through his welcome. His voice cracked slightly as he invited them in, waving toward the chairs like a flight attendant on their first day. Ben chalked it up to nerves at first. Some teachers weren't comfortable with parent interactions, especially when the dad looked as tired and suspicious as he probably did after a long workday. Lauren sat quickly, crossing one leg over the other and smiling with more ease than usual. She complimented the bulletin board. Commented on the lighting in the classroom. She was chatty, too chatty. Ben barely got a word in before she redirected the conversation to Emma's latest art project or how she had loved that recent field trip. Mr. Carter laughed a little too loudly at a comment Ben didn't even catch. And then, more glances. Quick ones. Sideways. Fleeting, but unmistakable. Ben leaned back, folding his arms loosely. Not saying much, just watching. Observing. Mr. Carter fumbled his notes. Mentioned Emma's reading scores, skipped over her math performance entirely, then backtracked awkwardly to say it had improved slightly. Ben caught the tremble in his hands when he adjusted his glasses. Caught the nervous glance toward Lauren when she chuckled about Emma being a perfectionist, just like her mom. Then Lauren did something subtle, barely noticeable to anyone who wasn't watching. She smoothed the hem of her sleeve. Not out of habit, but deliberately. Like someone adjusting themselves to be seen. Ben had known Lauren for over a decade. He knew her quirks, her mannerisms, the specific ways she laughed when she wasn't being sincere. She used it tonight. Twice. The whole conference couldn't have lasted more than 15 minutes, but it felt like an hour. When it ended, Mr. Carter stood as if they'd overstayed their welcome, even though they hadn't. He opened the door too quickly, ushered them out with a polite thank you and a look in his eyes that wasn't gratitude. It was fear. Out in the parking lot, Ben waited for Lauren to bring it up. She didn't. Instead, she commented on the moonlight, asked if he wanted to grab dinner, and brushed off the awkwardness in the room like it was nothing. Said Mr. Carter was just an anxious guy who clearly hadn't had much sleep. Teachers were under so much pressure, after all. Ben didn't say much. He nodded, started the car, and drove. She went on about how Emma had been doing better at home lately, how proud she was. Ben agreed. Emma had been thriving, in her own way. But that's not what he was thinking about. He was thinking about the way Lauren had reached for her phone every time it buzzed in the past few weeks. How she suddenly had a password on it, new behavior. How she started using her AirPods more often at home. How her weekly volunteer hours at school had recently doubled. How she said she didn't need Ben to come along anymore, said it would crowd the space. That she and Mr. Carter had it covered. Ben had ignored a lot over the last few months. Excused it, even. Work stress, parenting exhaustion, the ebb and flow of long-term marriage. But tonight? Tonight, something clicked. The pieces came together, and not subtly. They slammed into place like bricks dropped from a rooftop. He kept his face neutral the whole ride home. Kept the conversation light, even cracked a joke about PTA moms being scarier than most horror movies. Lauren laughed. But inside, Ben was done pretending. As they turned onto their street, he picked up his phone and typed out a message. Simple. Clean. Not even angry. Just, final. He hit send before she noticed. She was still rambling about how it was cute that Mr. Carter remembered Emma's favorite color. Ben didn't park in the driveway. He drove past their house. Kept going. And that night, he didn't come home. He went to a hotel just outside of town, checked in under a different name, and turned his phone off. Because when your wife's having an affair with your daughter's teacher, and thinks you're too blind to see it, words don't matter. Only actions do. Ben didn't storm in with accusations. He didn't scream or slam doors. That wasn't his style. Not anymore. He'd learned the hard way that silence was louder than yelling, and planning got you farther than rage ever could. After that night at the school, the way Mr. Carter stumbled over his words, the way Lauren kept talking like nothing was wrong, Ben knew something was happening. And if there was one thing he'd never do again, it was ignore his instincts. He spent the first night at a quiet hotel on the edge of town. Slept maybe 2 hours. Spent the rest staring at the ceiling and replaying every small thing he'd overlooked in the past 6 months. Missed calls. The shift in her laugh. The sudden new password on her phone. He didn't want to believe it, no man does, but belief had nothing to do with it now. This wasn't a feeling anymore. It was a puzzle. And Ben was going to solve it. By Sunday, he'd moved his things into a short-term rental across town. Nothing fancy, but clean. Quiet. Private. He told Lauren he needed space to think. She didn't push. Probably relieved. That told him more than her words ever could. Then the digging began. He started with the basics. Credit card statements. Most people don't think to hide those, not really. Ben had always handled the bills, so the logins were second nature. It didn't take long to find patterns. Charges from restaurants they'd never visited together. Strange Uber receipts at odd hours. A hotel downtown, once a week, always the same one, always during the same block of time when Emma was supposedly staying late for after-school activities. The first time he saw it, he stared at the screen for a long time. Long enough to hope it was some kind of mistake. But the pattern repeated. Over and over again. Same hotel. Same hours. Same lies. He tried the shared laptop next, the one they kept in the kitchen. Lauren rarely used it anymore, said it was slow. But old habits die hard, and when Ben opened the browser and pulled up saved logins, he found what he hadn't even known he was looking for. An alternate Gmail address. Not her usual name. Not connected to their home account. Just something generic enough to blend in. But she'd forgotten to sign out. It opened to a sea of messages, hundreds of them. And at the center of it all. One name, James. It wasn't subtle. The emails had subjects like, Wednesday plans, and, need to see you. Some had photos. Attachments that made Ben's stomach drop. They weren't explicit, not outright, but they were enough. A hotel room selfie here. A blurry shot of takeout containers on a rumpled comforter. Ben knew the wallpaper in the background. He recognized the logo on the corner of the napkin. He sat back in the chair, the glow of the screen still lighting his face, and stared out the window for a long time. James Carter. Emma's 5th-grade teacher. The man who'd smiled at Ben while shaking his hand. Who'd sat across from them both and told them how bright and imaginative their daughter was. The same man who had looked scared when Ben walked into the classroom just a few nights ago. Now he understood why. Ben clicked through more emails. They weren't just meeting. They were coordinating. Scheduling their time together around Emma's after-school schedule. Turning tutoring sessions into their cover. Their own daughter had been used like an alibi. That was what hit him hardest. He could stomach the affair. Or maybe he couldn't, but he could survive it. Men have survived worse. But the fact that Lauren dragged their child into it, used her as a shield, as a pawn, that sent something cold and sharp through his chest. He started making copies. He saved everything to a separate drive. Printed out key messages, bank records, photos, organized them into neat, dated folders. He didn't know what he'd do with them yet, but he needed to have them ready. Truth, he realized, had to be preserved. Because people like Lauren. They lie first, spin the story second, and destroy the evidence third. Ben wouldn't give her the chance. He went quiet around her. Started coming home less, always with an excuse. Work, errands, needing time alone. She didn't question it. In fact, she seemed to grow bolder. More relaxed. Like the danger had passed. Like whatever suspicion he'd had faded. Ben let her believe that. He smiled when she talked about Emma's upcoming school play. Nodded when she mentioned how dedicated Mr. Carter was staying late for tutoring. He asked casual questions just to watch her squirm. She never broke. That was the part that chilled him the most. She was good. So good at lying it made him wonder how long she'd been doing it. He started noticing the smaller things, perfume that wasn't his favorite but she wore more often now. New clothes tucked in the back of the closet. Her phone, face down at dinner. And Mr. Carter's name showing up in Emma's stories more frequently, like he was becoming part of their home through the back door. It was surgical, the way they had carved out their little world, one where Ben was nothing but a fading shadow. A detail to be managed. An obstacle to be ignored. But Ben wasn't a shadow. And he wasn't a fool. He replayed every car ride where Lauren said she was volunteering. Every time she brushed off his offer to join her. Every moment he'd watched Emma walk back from that school, happy and oblivious, while her mother was upstairs with her volunteer work. Ben kept working through the details like a man solving a crime scene, because in a way, he was. The crime was betrayal. The evidence was everywhere. He wasn't looking for confirmation anymore. He was collecting proof. A trail. A record of how someone can smile at you while burying a knife between your ribs. By the end of the week, the facts were undeniable. The affair had been going on for at least 4 months. The hotel receipts, emails, and even shared photo locations made that painfully clear. And through it all, Lauren never flinched. But Ben wasn't angry in the way people expected. He didn't want revenge for revenge's sake. What he wanted, what he needed, was clarity. And now he had it. What he felt was worse than anger. It was humiliation. Not just because she cheated, but because she'd done it so comfortably. Because she'd looked him in the eye each night and told him nothing was wrong. Because she'd made him second-guess himself for months. And now. The pretending was over. Ben wasn't going to yell. He wasn't going to fight. He was going to plan. He was going to act. And when it was time, they'd both realize just how quiet a man can be, right before everything changes. Ben had always been the kind of guy people underestimated. Quiet, steady, not prone to drama. The type who'd rather fix a problem than fight about it. He knew Lauren had banked on that, probably counted on him being too emotionally dull or too slow to catch on. She must have thought he'd roll over, retreat, maybe even blame himself. So he gave her exactly what she expected, a clueless, unbothered husband. In the days after his discovery, Ben turned his suspicion into strategy. He played it soft. Distant, but not cold. Quiet, but not withdrawn. He didn't accuse, didn't prod, didn't change his routine too much, just enough to make it feel like he'd accepted that they were going through something. Lauren seemed almost relieved, like she'd been waiting for that moment. She thought the tension had lifted. It hadn't. It had just moved underground. Ben set a few traps, subtle ones. He told Lauren he'd been thinking about scheduling another follow-up with Mr. Carter to talk about Emma's progress. He acted like he couldn't remember when the last conference had been, mumbling about how the weeks all blur together. He waited for her reaction. Lauren hesitated. Briefly. Just long enough for him to catch it. Then she nodded, maybe too quickly, covering with some excuse about checking the school's online calendar. Ben watched her closely. She didn't ask why he wanted a second meeting. She didn't offer to come along. She just seemed eager to move the conversation elsewhere. So he let her. He kept up the clueless act at dinner, even throwing out a casual joke about how she and Mr. Carter seemed like such a great team. He said it lightly, as if it didn't carry a second meaning. Watched her carefully. Lauren froze for a beat, barely noticeable, but then forced a laugh. Too loud, too forced. Ben knew that laugh. It was the one she used at dinner parties when she didn't get the joke but didn't want anyone to know. It didn't reach her eyes. It never had. That was all the confirmation he needed. She was still lying. That night, after she fell asleep beside him like nothing in the world was out of place, Ben slipped out of bed and got to work. The apartment he'd rented became his war room. He had files now, dozens of documents and screenshots. He'd taken everything he could off Lauren's backup accounts. Emails. Calendar entries. Photos. Payment confirmations from that downtown hotel. Even a few messages that had auto-synced to the shared tablet, ones she must have forgotten to delete. He made 3 copies of everything, 1 digital, 1 hard drive, 1 printed. Each went in a separate secure place. 2 stayed with him. 1 went into a locked deposit box under a new name. He wasn't just thinking about now, he was thinking ahead. If Lauren was willing to lie this thoroughly, there was no telling how far she'd go once he finally confronted her. When custody, reputation, and finances were on the line, people got desperate. Ben wasn't going to be caught flat-footed. Once the evidence was in order, he moved to the finances. Years of shared accounts had made everything easy, too easy. He quietly transferred half of their joint savings into a protected account under his name only. It wasn't about hiding money, it was about protecting what he had. She had already proven she was willing to hide things. He wasn't going to let her get the upper hand. He didn't clean out the account. That would have been obvious. Instead, he left enough behind to keep the illusion alive. Enough for groceries, bills, casual purchases. Enough for her to believe nothing had changed. The next step was the lawyer. Ben didn't want some aggressive, billboard-type attorney. He needed someone who understood the chessboard, someone with discretion. A friend from college had gone into family law years ago. They weren't close anymore, but close enough. Ben scheduled a meeting under the radar, made sure no one saw him walk into the office. He laid it all out, quietly, methodically. No embellishments. Just the facts. The lawyer listened, flipping through the binder of evidence in silence, occasionally nodding or jotting down notes. When he reached the emails and the tutoring schedules that overlapped with hotel receipts, his eyebrows rose slightly. By the end, he closed the folder, folded his hands, and gave Ben a nod that said, "This is going to be very easy." Ben didn't feel triumphant. He felt exhausted. But at least he wasn't lost anymore. He had a plan. Back at home, he kept the performance going. He asked about Lauren's day. He helped Emma with her homework. He played along. It wasn't easy. Every time Lauren smiled at him, he had to resist the urge to tell her he knew. Every time she reached out to touch his arm, he had to bury the disgust that twisted inside him. But he stayed composed. Because it wasn't just about catching her, it was about choosing when and how. Timing was everything. One false move, and she'd rewrite the narrative. Say he was controlling. Say he was paranoid. He'd seen it happen to men like him. So he stayed quiet. Patient. He kept a calendar of her absences, marked the days she came home late, logged when Emma stayed after school. He even followed her once. Just once. Enough to confirm that Mr. Carter wasn't just a name in an inbox. He was real. He was careless. And he had no idea how close the floor was to dropping out from under him. Lauren had built a world inside a lie. But Ben had spent the last week building something else entirely, a weapon made of silence, patience, and truth. And soon, when the moment was right, he'd use it. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to threaten. All he had to do was stop pretending. Ben had spent 2 weeks carefully constructing a mask. One of calm confusion, of the husband who needed space, but hadn't connected the dots. He wore it well, too well. And Lauren, for all her calculated deceit, believed in it. Believed she'd gotten away with it. That her affair had folded neatly into their family's routine like a misaligned piece in a puzzle no one looked closely at. But Friday morning, that mask came off. Ben woke before sunrise, already dressed. He packed a plain envelope, thick with damning evidence, and tucked it into his leather briefcase. Then he picked up a small white florist's card he'd written the night before, placed it inside a delivery sleeve, and double-checked the attached address label, James Carter, Room 108, Eastlake Elementary. The flowers were tasteful, nothing flashy. Crisp white lilies, with a single black ribbon. Delivered anonymously, but the message inside was impossible to ignore. It wasn't about theatrics. Ben didn't want chaos for the sake of it. He wanted clarity. He wanted accountability. By mid-morning, while most of the school was cycling into its lunch block, the delivery arrived. The receptionist logged it like any other delivery. Ben imagined the moment Mr. Carter opened it, the slight smile that fell away, the moment his eyes caught the handwriting. The note was short. Sharp. Enough to slice the air in half. Ben wasn't there to see it, but he didn't need to be. He already knew how the walls would start to close in. At exactly 1:30 p.m., he walked into the district building downtown. A quiet, clean lobby. Neutral paint, cheap chairs, a fish tank that hadn't been cleaned in months. He handed the receptionist an envelope addressed to the superintendent's office, sealed, labeled, confidential. She asked no questions, just smiled politely and set it on the counter beside her monitor. Inside that folder was the full story. Printed emails, some with timestamps that overlapped with school hours. Screenshots of private messages. Hotel receipts. Meal charges. Photos, not salacious, but personal. Intimate. Evidence of a pattern that spanned months. And more damning than any image were the tutoring schedules, the extended sessions, that happened to line up perfectly with the times Lauren and Mr. Carter had checked into that same downtown hotel. Ben hadn't included a cover letter. He didn't need to. The truth didn't require a narrator. He walked out without saying a word, without looking back. The entire exchange had taken under 5 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime's worth of weight lifted from his chest. The silence was over. The pretending was done. At 2:50 p.m., his phone buzzed. A forwarded message from a parent he knew from the PDA, brief, clipped, confused. Did you hear about Carter? By 3 p.m., Mr. James Carter had resigned for personal reasons. No farewell emails. No party. No long goodbye. Just a quiet, sudden disappearance announced by the principal's office in a voicemail blast to parents, filled with vague language and awkward tone. Ben sat in his car outside a coffee shop, watching the message scroll in, and didn't smile. Not really. This wasn't victory in the traditional sense. It was vindication. Cold. Quiet. Necessary. At 4:17 p.m., the first call came from Lauren. Ben watched the screen light up. Let it ring. Then another. Then two more, back to back. Each call dropped without a voicemail. Then came the texts, first confused, then panicked. She asked where he was. Said she needed to talk. Switched tactics. Said something was wrong. Said she was scared. Then she tried sympathy. Talked about family and love and how people make mistakes. She pivoted again, said he was being cruel, that he was hurting Emma, that this wasn't the man she married. 10 texts in 30 minutes. Each one louder in its desperation than the last. Ben read them in silence. Set his phone down. Let her sit in it. At 5:03 p.m., he typed his only reply. No punctuation. No yelling. Just a single line that carried more weight than anything else he could have said. It landed like a final nail in a coffin. And after that, nothing. No more calls. No more texts. Just digital silence. Exactly what she'd given him all those months when she was sneaking around. Except now, the silence had a witness. A paper trail. A resignation letter. Ben didn't go home that night. He stayed at the rental, cooked a quiet dinner, watched the evening news. He checked on Emma through a shared school app and saw she'd been picked up on time. A note from her substitute teacher mentioned she'd done well during reading time. Normal things. Grounding things. What struck Ben most wasn't the relief. It was the stillness. The knowledge that he didn't have to pretend anymore. That whatever Lauren spun in the coming days, whatever lies she crafted, excuses she offered, none of it would erase the truth now etched into the record. She could cry. She could bargain. She could rewrite every detail in her version of the story. But the facts spoke louder than her voice ever could. Mr. Carter was gone. The school board had the files. The emails were saved in 3 separate locations. The financial records had already been reviewed by Ben's lawyer. And Lauren? She was unraveling, one missed call at a time. Ben didn't gloat. He didn't tell anyone what he'd done. The most dangerous revenge, he knew, wasn't loud or violent. It was surgical. Clean. A removal of rot. This wasn't about destroying her. It was about saving himself. About stepping out of the lies she'd built around them and lighting a match on his way out. By the time night fell, Ben was already thinking about next steps. The legal filings. Custody arrangements. Protecting Emma. Rebuilding. He never raised his voice. He just raised the truth, and let it burn. It had been a little over a week since the envelope changed everything. Ben now lived in a small, furnished rental just a few blocks away from the house he once called home. The place smelled faintly of wood polish and new carpet, with furniture that didn't have memories attached to it. No framed photos. No awkward silence in the hallway where Lauren used to pretend nothing was wrong. It was neutral, almost bland, but it felt cleaner than anything he'd known in months. He could breathe in this space. Emma came over every weekend. The custody arrangement hadn't gone to court yet, but Lauren wasn't exactly in a position to argue. Emma brought her stuffed animals, her reading books, her favorite cereal. She asked questions sometimes, but never the hard ones. Kids knew when things were broken. Ben didn't lie. He didn't badmouth Lauren either. He just told the truth in fragments, a careful balance between protection and reality. Lauren was spinning, caught in a storm of her own making. Word of the resignation spread fast. Parents started talking. Teachers too. The phrase, inappropriate relationship, circled staff lounges like wildfire. The school board launched an internal review. Mr. Carter's name vanished from the staff directory before the weekend hit, and within days, rumors about his license being suspended started surfacing. The story was out there now. Not in headlines or official reports, but in whispers, those low conversations that fell quiet when someone walked by. The ones that hung in the air long after the bell rang. Lauren tried to downplay it all. She told friends it wasn't really cheating. Said it was complicated, that she and Ben had been distant for months. Claimed it was more emotional than physical, that it wasn't the same as having an affair with another man. Some people nodded. Others just listened and changed the subject. But the damage was done. People knew. Not just what she did, but how she did it. The fact that their daughter had unknowingly been a part of the cover made it worse. That part spread the fastest. The lie wasn't just personal, it was parental. She hadn't just betrayed her husband. She'd used her own child as camouflage. Ben didn't need to say a word. He didn't argue. Didn't correct the record publicly. The truth had its own legs. It walked through faculty lounges and church pews. It found its way into Facebook threads and whispered phone calls. And it stuck. He got occasional texts from mutual acquaintances, some offering quiet support, some awkwardly fishing for details. He answered few of them. Not out of spite, but because it didn't matter anymore. The people who mattered knew. The rest could speculate all they wanted. He kept his days simple. Work during the week. Emma on the weekends. The space between filled with rebuilding, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet, necessary kind. He went back to running in the mornings. Started cooking again. Deleted old playlists that reminded him of the person Lauren used to be. Some nights, he still thought about the moment it all broke open, the flowers, the folder, the silence afterward. Not with regret. Just reflection. It hadn't been revenge for revenge's sake. It had been justice. Precision over chaos. The difference between reacting and responding. He hadn't smashed her phone. He hadn't screamed in her face. He hadn't taken his daughter and vanished in the middle of the night. He just waited. Collected facts. Let her dig the hole, and then stepped back as she fell into it. The house he left behind now felt like a stage where a play had ended. Lauren still lived there, but from what Ben heard through a mutual friend, it felt different now. Quiet. Unsettled. Like something was missing, and she was finally starting to notice what that something was. She had bet on him being the passive one. The one too slow to see, too kind to fight back. But she'd misunderstood kindness for weakness. And silence for stupidity. Ben had always believed that trust wasn't something to be gambled with. And once someone did, there was no going back. Not really. You could rebuild from ashes, but you never saw the same house again. Now, when he sat across from Emma during breakfast and she talked about her new science project, he didn't feel like he was surviving. He felt like he was living. Slowly. Gently. Authentically. He didn't hate Lauren. He had loved her once. Maybe part of him always would. But love wasn't immunity, and betrayal had a way of scrubbing everything clean, good memories included. What he did feel, more than anything, was freedom. No more walking on eggshells. No more second-guessing late nights and changed passwords. No more wondering if he was imagining things. Everything was out in the open now. And that kind of truth. It didn't need fireworks. It just needed patience. Some people cheat because they're bored. Some because they're cowards. But when you lie through your teeth while using your own kid as cover, you don't get fireworks. You get exposed, by a husband smart enough to let you dig your own grave.